very good afternoon, everyone. Hope and hearty welcome to the second episode of Slice the Pie. With lockdown getting extended till 3rd May, I hope everybody is staying home and staying safe. So, to introduce myself one more time, I am Pavni, head of marketing at Addverb Technologies. I'll be hosting your session today. Before we begin with, during last session, thank you very much for the overwhelming response. Unfortunately, due to paucity of the time, we couldn't answer all the queries. So we could answer whatever we can during the session. And for the rest of the queries, we did reach out to you through email. The same thing will be happening today as well. I would encourage to post your questions in the chat box, and we would take them as and when possible. And for whatever we couldn't, we would definitely reach out to you through our email ID. And so coming to today's topic, the topic is impact of COVID-19 on intra-logistics operations. So, today we are all living in a different world, a reality that none of us have ever experienced. The outbreak of Corona has forced us to adopt to a different lifestyle, and it has shown a different perspective of everything. In fact, the same is applied for businesses as well. Today organizations are going through an unprecedented situation that that is totally entirely different from the challenges that they have faced, earlier. And with half the world is under lockdown, so supply chain operations have never been more challenging than this time. And intra-logistics being a key area to achieve operational efficiencies and competitive advantage, it needs an entirely special treatment during these tough times. And in fact, most importantly and more than ever, this is the time one has to live up to all the promises that made to the customers about promptness and the accuracy of services. So this is the exact reason why we wanted to host this webinar about. And so that is the and it has been requested from some of our key people as well. So coming to the presenter, today's session will be presented by Sangeet sir. He's our CEO. Sangeet sir comes with an experience of over 15 years in robotics, ASRS, warehouse automation, picking technologies, IoT, etc. In his earlier stints, he did set up some of the most automated, world's most automated factories and warehouses for two Asian Paints and Gale. So he's the Indian champion of Industry 4.0, and with a vision to bring world-class automation to the Indian organizations. In 2016, he left Asian Paints and started Addverb Technologies, which has now spread its wings to the global audience as well. So with this, I would like Sangeet sir to take over from here. And sir.
Thanks, Pavni. Thanks for generous introduction. I'll just correct one thing. Now I have around 18 years of experience, 3 years in Addverb as well, 15 years prior to Addverb. So today's topic, what we will be discussing in next 1 hour is impact of COVID-19 on intralogistics. And we cannot for sure say that these are the only impacts which will be there, what is enlisted in this presentation. There will be many more, and as the situation unfolds, there will be things which will get added, and there will be responses to those challenges which we will be keep on posting in our LinkedIn. So as far as COVID-19 and intralogistics is concerned, so what I'll be covering in this presentation is life and everything around us post-COVID. So, and I would not say post-COVID because this is some kind of misnomer which is going on that after 3rd May or after a lockdown, everything will be normal. It will not be. As we know, the vaccine, which is a sure shot solution, is almost 1 year from us. So we will be living in this world for next 1 year. So for this next 1 year, the challenges would remain, though in a lesser form or lesser way, and we will be knowing most of the problems and we will not be caught by surprise, but challenges will exist. And this presentation is concentrated on the effect or the life and everything around us in the supply chain, because life and everything around us is going to change in many ways, and it is a too broad topic, and what we will be concentrating is on supply chain and the experiences till now, how resilient has been our supply chain and what we should be doing in future to make it more resilient. This is what we will be talking about. And the effect of consumer behavior or life and everything around us, and how it is going to affect the warehouses, which is one of the important pillars of the supply chain, and to cater to those challenges, what we can do and what our response should be. That is what I'll be covering in this short presentation. First of all, the change, and this is a big change that we are going through, and most of us are experiencing, which is work from home and school from home. So even the kids are not left, and the schooling has started after some shutdown. And so these are the two things which is going to change, and whether we start tomorrow or whether we are going to start after third, etc., number of people who would gather in a office or in a factory or in a mall or in a school, that is going to change. And the behavior of the people in this setup, that also is going to change. And how this behavior is going to affect the supply chain is what I'll be covering in few slides from now. The other big change which is going to happen, and this is something which will definitely affect, and I am coming to the consumer behavior, it will definitely affect the way food and grocery chain supply chain is modeled. So the number of people who were eating out and number of people who would be eating inside the home in a safe environment, even when it is getting delivered at your home, that also is not that safe, and that is what our experiences has been. So cooking food in home is something which will gain over restaurants, which has been the trend for last 25-30 years across the world. So in US in 2014, that was the year, watermark year, when the business or the sales out of restaurants increased or crossed the sales of the grocery. That means people going out and having food were giving more business than people going to grocery and buying things for food. So this is something which happened in 2014 in US. India was rapidly moving towards that, and therefore we see so many number of restaurants, good restaurants coming up, and people going out enjoying food in the evening and even in office hours. So that is going to change. That is definitely going to change. And my guess is people will move towards having food in house home, and that this consumer behavior itself will lead to lot of changes in SKUs which get stocked at the retail chain, or SKUs which people are asking for on the online channel. All these SKUs were SKUs which some of those SKUs were SKUs which were particularly important in restaurant kind of environment, but that is going to change, and for good or for bad we have to say, but definitely that is going to change. The other thing which is going to change is because of the first two changes, which is work from home, schooling from home, and because we are inside the home, the consumption pattern of certain SKUs are going to change, and the whole supply chain, the supply chain which existed to serve institutions like school, offices, factories, etc., was a different kind of supply chain. then, and it is still maybe some part of the supply chain remains the same, but at certain point of time it branches, and that branches that is what ensures that the goods are delivered to these factories or restaurants or offices in a different way, and then the way goods are delivered to domestic consumers through retail outlet or through kirana stores or through e-commerce, etc. So when I say retail alternate, it means organized retail. And this is very interesting, and I've been reading a lot about this change in pattern or SKUs. So and one of the example which is catching the attention of many people is the way consumption has happened for bathroom tissues in US or in Europe. And so the initial thing was that, and initial reason what people concluded or jumped at was that there was panic buying, and that is why it was happening. But no, later on they realized there are several reasons for this, and one of the reason was that the tissue consumption which was happening in offices, in trains, in schools, etc., those things have come down drastically because people were not moving out to offices, whereas all these consumptions moved to home. So the supply chain which was dedicated to the home, which is retail channel and e-commerce channel, was not able to cater to this need. Though the production was the same, the consumption place was changed, and therefore the supply chain could not cater to it. These are interesting things which are happening. I'll give you another example. Because schooling for home or schooling from home is becoming popular now, a number of A4 pages which are getting consumed for taking printouts, or the printer cartridge. So personal printers, almost everyone are aspiring, or the middle class is aspiring to have that in home, because of, not because of work from home to that extent, but because kids are there. The other thing, again, another example which is coming, and I just read it today, was how the beauty companies or manufacturers, because they are not able to and salons are not open, and therefore the consumption is not happening on that ground, how those SKUs can be moved towards a different supply chain, reaching out to the customers directly. Now these are the thought process which is happening, and therefore the SKUs which used to be C class, D class, E class might become A class or B class, or SKUs which were not there in the warehouse at all. That becomes more and more important. Coming to the fourth important change which is going to happen and which is going to affect the supply chain more and more is the availability of manpower, or how do we plan for execution in warehouses, in supply chains, who would be available, and whether the migrant population, the migrant workers, whether, and in the warehouses, in the logistic space, if you see, there are more number of migrant workers who are working than people from that state. So how is it going to affect the supply chain, and what we need to do to ensure that our supply chain remains resilient when changes or the supply of manpower happens. So as a change in supply of manpower happens. The other thing which is going to change, and forever and for good, at least in Indian context, is the workplace hygiene. And the importance of workplace hygiene will go up, will shoot up. And maybe some of the things will be forced, which is the government's, because of the government statute or government rule, etc. And some of the things will be what companies will do on their own to protect their people. And this is something which is and every person life and health is important, and which will get more and more realized in Indian context as far as work is concerned. So this is the change which I'll be talking about, and how these changes in the consumption pattern, or the changes which have been forced because of this coronavirus, how these changes are going to affect supply chain. That is something which I'll be talking in the next section. Now, coming to the supply chain itself, and how resilient has been the supply chain in our first cut response to this situation. To be very frank, I don't think the supply chain, most supply chain of most companies, though few companies, there are exceptions, and those exceptions will be the case study for us to emulate in future. But most of the companies has been found wanting in the response by the supply chain. And the major reason here is over the years, we have cut the flap which existed in this whole chain. And we have taken a lot of pride in cutting this flap, which is rightly so as well. But that slack which was available where during these times, during these situations, that was not available, and therefore the response has been found wanting. Now, what are the areas where it has been found wanting is now alternate source of supply, and which is one thing where we have become too dependent on certain geography, or too dependent on certain vendors, and that has hit us bad. The other thing which has been happening, or which has led us to this situation, is though we are confident of our suppliers, but the supplier's supplier, we didn't know where the materials came from for this supplier's supplier, and that is what again has hit us, because that supplier was dependent on one supplier in a particular geography, and therefore my supply is also affected. Now that is something which because of which there has been problem in the way supply chain has responded to the consumer need. The third thing which I am coming to is there is a big question now on whether we should be having the private fleet, even when the raw materials or the finished goods was available, and the government had given a go ahead to transport these material from one place to another, at least for the essential goods. The fleet was not available. Why was it not available? Because we have moved from having a private fleet to a fleet where we didn't know the face, and because we didn't know the face, there was no way we could give the confidence to these people that nothing would happen, and therefore you have to come and serve. And that is another thing which has affected. I'll come to the contactless delivery a bit later. The other thing which has been challenged is and something which will change forever because of this attack, or coronavirus attack, is our love for globalization. And many companies will think of having localization as an option, and it is the localization of not only the suppliers, but how do we serve the customers, whether it has to be from one warehouse, or it has to be several warehouses, or the network itself will be questioned, and how do we make this network more resilient in situations like this, or at least for next 1 year or 1.5 years, when this thing will continue to happen, which is what is predicted. The other thing which is very one pillar which has stood its ground during these challenging times is the kirana stores, and these are a number of kirana stores or mom and pop stores today in India would be in the range of 2 crores plus, including the rural setup, and there are many big FMCG giants who are able to reach 70-80% of this thing. Now, these kirana stores have been the pillars of providing essential good to us, and they have shown their importance in this challenging time. Those, and it is not only that they have delivered and therefore the panic buying has reduced to a lot, but it is also the way, the ingenuity, the innovation that they have brought in delivering these kirana items or essential items to household is marvelous. The and I was talking about the localization, and I was again talking to one of our friends who works for a FMCG company, and he spoke at length about how these kirana store people, how they have hired their own transportation arrangement or their bike, and you can see the bike which is there on the in the photograph, and especially I have put this photograph for that. So they have hired a bike or some vehicle, gone to the distributor's warehouse and brought the material. It is not even when because distributor was unable to serve these kirana stores, the counter buying at distribution centers by these retailers has gone up to 60%. That is how they have been able to secure the goods and items which we are able to buy. The other thing which, and it is a very interesting photograph which I downloaded from net, you see the way social distancing is maintained in these kirana, and you can see these white squares or white circles or white lines, etc., across the kirana stores. These are small kirana stores, and they doing this and ensuring social distancing is something which was unthinkable. So kirana stores have been the heroes and champions, and they will continue. They have shown their importance, and whosoever was writing them off, etc., or believing that these pillars over a period of time can go out of this supply chain, that is not going to happen, and that is for sure. And salute to the efforts by this important pillar in the supply chain for ensuring that the goods are available to us. The other thing is stocking of essentials, and this is going to happen, and this is going to continue to happen in future as well. And wherever and whenever we have some kind of emergency, this is something which is on display every time. And because of this because of this spur in consumption, the supply chain is not able to match it. And some of the companies have done extremely good in managing this, when they said, be simple. I will not be producing so many SKUs in these tiring times. I'll produce only one SKU or one pack of this SKU, which is the most popular or which is the biggest, and therefore I'll reduce the complexity of manufacturing, complexity of handling, and at supply chain and retail. So the simplicity is another thing which will keep on happening to manage these essentials. Coming to so we spoke about the changes which is going to happen, or which has been forced on us because of coronavirus, which is going to affect the supply chain. We have spoken about the resilience in supply chain, and what has happened, what has happened, on how did we respond to the changes in, and what are the pillars which have become more strong coming out of the supply chain. Now, if we look at these two things and then think in a long-term perspective, what is it that is going to change in the warehouse, and what we need to do to respond, so that warehouse also becomes a big hero in our fight of coronavirus or this COVID-19 situation. So the only hero till now has been the Kirana store. So how do we make even the warehouses become the important pillar, which they are, but how do I make them more responsible, more flexible, so that even in the situations when we have attack like this, or when we have continued or prolonged change in our consumption pattern, how do we respond, and how do we design warehouses, how do we look at the operation of these warehouses? That is what I'll be talking in the next 10 to 15 minutes. The first thing first, and I spoke about stock keeping unit, and this is going to change in the warehouse. There, whatever we were talking about, and if I in the last 2 years or 2.5 years, we have been working with a lot of grocery warehouses, and people are talking about 5,000, 10,000, 30,000, 50,000 SKU. Now that definitely is going to change, and in some places it is going to reduce the total number of SKUs, because manufacturers will make their supply chain simpler. The other places, what is going to happen is the SKUs which were A class, B class, C class, because some of them were getting consumed in offices and factories to a large extent. That is going to change. The consumption, let us say, I am giving a simple example of tea. The consumption pattern of tea in offices and in home is very, very different, and therefore the supply chain, and because in offices number of people would reduce, and that is something which is going to definitely happen. If work from home, if people are effective from work, in the cases of work from home, those jobs will continue to be operated from work from home. So these SKUs, the nature of these SKUs are going to change, and therefore we have to design warehouses, we have to operate warehouses where, if the nature of SKU is going to change, I don't have to slot it very often, and what is the kind of intelligence that I need to build in this warehouse management system or warehouse execution system, which makes it more responsive, and therefore makes it more agile in this slotting thing. So this is something which is going to change. The other thing is inventory, and I was talking about this, the slack. And because we have been cutting inventories to make the whole supply chain more cost effective, these things get challenged. And when you have your supplier base quite spread apart, then these things get challenged more. And therefore, in some of the cases, or I would say in most of the cases, the inventory will go up, definitely will go up, and these decisions will be strategic decisions by company, but this is the guess, and which will lead to more inefficient supply chain, but inefficient in the way we are managing the inventory, but not inefficient in serving the customer, which has taken the front seat. On time in full, OTIF, that is what customer needs today, and that will be ensured only when in some places, and this has to be the judicious decision, but in some places where the supply is not that reliable and it needs to be tested, and then the inventory needs to go up. Now,
Sangeet sir, while we are
yeah.
at it, there are two questions which are very relevant to be discussed at this point. So I would like to tell one. So do you see SKUs based on requirement of nuclear family? Bulk will come back from one-time use. So could you please
I'm
explain?
sorry, I did not get the question.
Do you see SKUs based on requirement of nuclear family? Do bulk will come back from one-time use?
Yes. So yes, the okay, nuclear families, and in India it is still a mix of nuclear family and a combined family. But the nuclear families will drive the consumption. That is for sure. And if uh, uh, 50% of them, and in alternate days people go to offices, or 50% of the people go to offices, the middle class mostly, that is something which is going to drive change. That is again my prediction. How things will go unfold is something which we have to see, but yes, this is what I feel at this point of time.
Okay. Will decentralized supply chain increase? Decentralized manufacturing will increase. So, which one?
Okay. To this question, still feel manufacturing will be centralized, but it is the delivery to the end customers which will get more decentralized. Okay, in India, and as Sriram was saying in the last webinar, that in India, because of we were decentralized. Because of GST, we started making larger warehouses, and then because of the change in the consumption pattern, etc., we are again thinking of being decentralized. So same has been the case with the manufacturing as well. There were a lot many small factory, except few companies. Now they started thinking of having large mammoth companies which are more and more efficient, which can produce a single SKU, limited SKUs, etc. But when these factories were designed, this it was always kept in mind that there will be certain SKUs which will be produced at a large scale, and there will be some SKUs which will get produced in a small scale, and it has to be flexible, and it has to be this factory need not be a very large scale factory. It has to be decentralized kind of thing. So but my belief is there will be centralization of factory, but warehouses would become more and more decentralized in this whole network to serve the customer. uh, Moving forward, the third thing, so I spoke about the SKU. We spoke about inventory. The third thing which is going to be a norm is e-grocery, and these are statements of real executives in India and in US. This So in India, the e-grocery contribution to the total grocery was 0.2% till last year, which is December 2019. Now it was supposed to go to 1.5% in 2024, and that itself was a huge jump in terms of absolute value, etc. And we were looking for and therefore bigger companies were coming into this space to change. Apart from startups were coming into this space, and same thing was happening in US as well. US, it was much better. Last year it was around 3.5%, and by 2024 people were hoping that it will go to 10%. But and that was in 4 years time. And what happened because of this attack, coronavirus thing or COVID-19, in India, it has almost doubled, and there is lot of talk which is going on between the delivery companies like Swiggy, Zomato, Rapido, etc., and organized retail players like Spencer's, Big Bazaar, etc., Grofers, etc., coming together and collaborating to accelerate this shift of organized retail to e-grocery. Now, and in US, believe me, in 4 weeks' time, this 3.5% number has gone to 12%. Okay, it will reduce, it will definitely reduce, but how much is something which I believe that it will not reduce to a large extent. So why is that belief? And it is backed by data. The two changes which has led to this is there are 20 to 30% of new buyers who have joined these platforms, and they are the new additions, new customers who have come. The second thing is elderly people who never took pride in buying from these platforms, at least grocery. They wanted to see it, touch it, feel it before buying it. That is going to change because of and that has changed in a big way because of them being more vulnerable to COVID-19, and therefore they are the people who are ordering more. The other thing which has happened is the basket size has changed. Whatever, if people were ordering X amount, that is 1.2x kind of thing, or 1.3x in India, and almost double in US and Europe. And the fourth thing, and this is again very important, is the manpower, and how warehouses will respond, because there is today the first thing what happened in the warehouses after the lockdown is those people who were almost on a permanent role, because of the community pressure, and because of the pressure from the people who were living in and around, they stopped going to the warehouses. There was second category of people who were daily wage earners, and they were mostly the migrant workers, and they also moved out. So this is something which will continue to happen. One, the government will not allow more than 50% or more than 60% of the people to come to the warehouses. Second, the warehouses, how it will respond is they might, and because they are also, these companies are also responsible for the safety of the people when they move out to their home. So what they would like to do is maybe on-premise stay, or these people have to be from the nearby villages itself. That is something which is going to happen. The other thing is people will use technology to know whether he is green or yellow or red, orange or red, the way it is happening in China, whether the people came in contact or whether he traveled to a place where there was someone who was affected, and therefore they will be allowed in the warehouse. These are something which is going to happen. The other thing is in the warehouses itself, the operation. So social distancing is something which will take or move upward, and therefore how many people in the aisle, and people would be using social distancing markers at the packing place, at the place where there is an interaction between the truck drivers and the operators in the warehouse. They will try to make the warehouse flow one-way traffic so that less number of people come in contact with each other. This is something, again, will change the way warehouses operate, and that is how people will make people working in these warehouses more safe and secure. I spoke about SKUs, inventory level, omni-channel, how the warehouses will have to cater to the needs of both retailers and e-grocery suppliers. So omni-channel distribution, and therefore it has to be more flexible. Manpower availability, stay and transport of these people, change in layout and PPE in daily disinfection. These are some things which needs to be done or which will change in the operation of the warehouse. Now, how automation is going to help, and this is the last section of my presentation. And these challenges, we spoke about all these challenges, how some of these challenges can be catered to is something which I'm going to answer in next 5 to 10 minutes, and then there will be 10 minutes of question answer. The answer to more SKUs and more inventory in the situation where we don't have retail space in the outside the city, the larger retail spaces, or real estate spaces, or inside the city, is more SKU and more inventory per cubic feet. And this is something which automation can achieve. And when I say more inventory, it can be either in the form of pallet form. So typical, when in a normal racking system, you store 1.24 pallet per square meter. There are technologies today where you can store 6 to 8 pallet per square meter. And again, I am talking about a square meter, and this is possible because you are using the cubic space, the height of the warehouses. Or if it is inside the city, then even whatever height is available, and that might be 7 meter, 8 meter, that if you use those height and you start talking in the terms of cubic feet, that is when you will be able to store more SKU or more inventory. The other thing how automation is going to help is in the productivity, because the number of people who would be restricted, and you will not find many people also looking for job in these tough situations which are there in warehouse, typical manual warehouse. So what is going to happen is and you cannot have this warehouse be less productive, or the throughput needs can reduce. So what is those warehouses which were employing 500,000 people and 1,500 people, they will have to deliver same throughput with 100 people, 150 people, 75 people, and that too in a wild change of the shift. They cannot touch each other, and therefore there will be 1 hour gap, etc., etc. And because of that, the picking becomes, which consumes 60% of the manpower, that will become very, very important. The other thing which is going to, and there the technology which will come into play is person to goods technology or goods to person technology, where if from a normal manual picking of 50 picks per person per hour, you can go up to 400 picks or lines per person per hour. With person to goods technology like pick to light or Khushi, which is pick by voice. Similarly, in goods to person, you can go up to 1,200 lines per person per hour with carton settle and a mobile robotics thing, or a carton settle and packing station or conveyor. So these are some things which can ensure with 1/5 the manpower or 1/4 the manpower, you can deliver the same throughput. The other thing is the truck loading, where you have so many people coming very close to each other to load the truck, which is 4 to 6 people. That is something which and we have as a country, we have never moved from fluidized load to palletized load, and that is not going to happen in the future as well. So the other option is the So there has to be telescopic conveyor which needs to be put, but it is not only telescopic conveyor. The upward or the automation which is required to serve this telescopic conveyor on the go within 1 hour, the truck needs to be loaded, etc. That also has to be in place to ensure that the throughput remains the same with lesser manpower. The other thing which we were talking about, and in the person to goods technology, it becomes more and more important, is how do we ensure the social distancing? And there are technologies available today which can ensure social distancing in the warehouse. You can track every manpower with the accuracy of accuracy in centimeters, where you can track and you can manage. So the task which you give to the person ensures that there is a gap of 6 feet which is considered and that can be done by a very flexible self-learning warehouse execution system. So this is another thing which will more and more people will be asking for it and would be talking about. Decentralized warehouse, this is something there was one of the question which was there. Now, because localization is something which will remain and definitely is going to those companies which move faster in this space will be the leaders. And when one of the way of localization is micro fulfillment. And I was talking to this friend of mine, and I asked him, what is the biggest challenge while operating FMCG company in these tiring times? And one of the things which he said caught my attention was that with the help of local police, the kirana store person or the distributor, these people have been able to secure the supply chain and give or deliver the products to the customers. But what and this is because of their relationship, this is because of their nearness to the customer, or because of the local administration. The bigger warehouses have to have a permission which has to go through district magistrate, and which has to go through chief secretary of government, which has been the government has been great in helping, but still it takes a lot of time in getting the work done. So this is the answer: micro fulfillment, where you can store more number of SKUs, where you can deliver to the customer in a fast manner, and you can be newer to the customer. So when the problems occur of interstate travel, or even in the state, the district becomes hotspot, etc. If you have localized warehouse, that is when you will be able to serve to the customer in a much better way. Finally, flexible operation automation, we have been talking about it for quite some time to manage the spurt of SKUs, and this is something which will gain more importance, or it will gain, people will go for, when they are designing their warehouses, they want their warehouses to be very, very flexible, which can respond to the emergencies like COVID-19. Now, final and coming, this is the last slide, and then there is question and answer. The final thing is disinfecting the warehouse. Definitely, the way packaging happens at the manufacturing end, that is also going to change. They will go for packaging where viruses or bacteria, etc., do not last long, etc. Those are the things which will happen, and people will go towards those packaging where the hours is limited to 1 hour, 2 hour, not 15 hours, 16 hours. That is going to happen. But apart from that, the because people need to be safe while working in the warehouse, and the goods which are delivered to the customer, that also should not be the carrier of viruses, COVID-19. Therefore, the disinfection will become very, very important. And here, the hydrogen peroxide solution or the UV light while the warehouse is in silent hours, these are something which will gain importance in the coming days. This is what I had to say. I am open for questions. Pavni.
Yes, sir. There is one question from Mihir. He is appreciating the fact that Kirana stores have been really the heroes during this entire time. But his question is, with transportation opening up, won't e-commerce be a safer option in terms of stay at home and social distancing? Hasn't the Kirana store succeeded during these challenging times on the backdrop of lockdown and transportation? So once transportation is up and running, so what would be the situation?
So it is not that okay. To answer this question, the grocer or the big basket, if you see the number of deliveries which they were making every day, it was 1,60,000 before this, and now it is 1,80,000 or around 1 lakh for respective player. So it is almost doubled. So they have also doubled the delivery, but that is too less. 0.2%, 0.4%, it will become 1% maybe maximum, and that itself will be a success, or 1.5% by end of this year, and that itself will be a huge success if it happens. But still, it is not only, and there are concerns with these players doubling their even then there are concerns about, and people are talking about contactless delivery, etc., because the person who is bringing it, you don't know him. In case of kirana stores, you know him by person, by name, and therefore you trust him more. And and they are everywhere in every society today, and therefore and you feel more confident in walking to him and getting material from him, and you have more confidence in him that he would be more hygienic in supplying the material. Therefore, I think kirana store will become more strong with a great supply chain supporting by e-commerce companies. So B2B2C or B2B will for larger e-commerce companies will also become a play. So where they don't have the expertise or they don't have the muscle power and money power, that will be taken care by large companies, and the front end with a digital makeover will be the future as far as kirana store is concerned.
Yeah. So Ankur is asking, other than ASRS, what are the other technologies that can be deployed in warehouses to improve productivity with reduced manpower?
So other than, so ASRS is a very broad term, and it all depends on what is it that you want to deliver. So and at what speed. So if it is more number of SKUs and the speed is high and number of cartons per SKU is much less, then you go for a system like Quadron or carton settle or mobile robots, etc. Like mobile shuttles, so mobile robot with having which are robo shuttles, and they make the warehouse more automated and more flexible. Apart from that, yes, ASRS will definitely be there, and it was innovation which has ruled the world for last 30 years. So in certain cases that will coexist with the new kind of automation which is there, like carton shuttles or like robo shuttles or robots, mobile robots, etc. Apart from that, the people to make people more productive, you use their more number of senses, and that is something which technologies like natural language processing and AI is enabling the people to do.
Do you think the present time is the perfect time for the introduction of delivery drones from the MFCs?
I am not sure about it, about the technology, the development of technology today, and uh, how how feasible will it be over a period of time. There is a lot of statute which is going to change, which has to change to make it possible. It is. I still feel it is 3 to 5 years away.
And the similar lines, there is one more question. How delivery partners will practice contactless delivery or delivery robot solution fit in India for this? I mean, think it's the same thing.
There might not be delivery robots, but contactless. So there are people, and I know of a company in the world which makes a container, which this container is fully automated with robot, and these containers are 40 feet, 60 feet containers. You just so the delivery is picked in the warehouse and delivered to these containers, and then people collect it with their RFID chip or with their pin code which comes on their mobile. So that is something, one way of delivering. Delivery robot in universities and institutions might start becoming normal, but we have to see.
Okay. One more question. During this pandemic, one thing we noticed was startups, especially robotics companies, have emerged out supporting healthcare, aiding the situation. So, can we expect such a demand for intra-logistics as well? Interestingly, e-commerce and retailing companies now have a much greater demand for goods. With this in mind, will companies look for robotic solutions to meet their increasing customer demands?
Of course, that is going to happen, and that is why there is one slide where I spoke about flexible automation, though I did not give a lot of time there. I think that is going to happen. As a company, we have been getting a lot of calls exploring this option, and therefore, I think in the future, the way technology. So, there is this meme which is going on internet, whether so what brought digitization? Was it CIO, was it CEO's dream, or COVID-19? So people overwhelmingly said COVID-19. So that is another thing which is in the warehouse perspective, or the question what needs to be asked is what brought robotics into warehouse, and definitely the answer would be COVID-19
Okay.
to the
Um,
extent.
Yeah. One last question. Do you foresee pallet loading becoming more common than floor loading for transportation?
The biggest challenge there in pallet loading, and I have been involved in one of the project in my earlier stint, is the 15% of the space that you lose on a truck, and that not no manufacturer or no distributor is willing to give away with until unless they are gaining something. So the gain right now is not that much, and therefore pallet loading is something uh, which uh, uh, which is not going to be popular in India. Of course, there will be few companies who will start doing it. There is another reason for that. Even in Europe, pallet loading is. Uh, I'm sorry. Pallet loading is becoming less popular, and it is because of two reasons. One, again, the load, 15% of the load, they are also losing it. The second is the second reason is the demand from the customers, which is in eaches, or the number of rainbow pallets which are getting formed. These are two reasons which are making handling through pallet more difficult. I would not say it is impossible, but it is becoming more and more difficult. It seems Pavni is not audible, and so this is the end of it. Thank you very much for attending this, and thank you very much. Uh,
Am I audible now?
yeah, now you are audible, Pavni.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much, everyone. Still, there are a lot of questions which we could not answer due to paucity of the time. So, in case of any further questions, please write down to automate@adverb.in. I just put it in the chat box. And for the questions which we couldn't answer, we'll get back to them through email. And so thank you very much. And we would be, for the next session, would be impact of automation solutions for healthcare industry to combat COVID-19. So we would be emailing you the date and time of the event. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.